When do you realize your partner's ex, who you thought was crazy, was actually telling the truth about him? I thought Jessica was just hurt. For 2 years, she'd been messaging me on Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Always the same warnings about my boyfriend Marcus. He's not who you think he is. Ask him about a restraining order. Check his phone while he's asleep. I'd show Marcus the messages, and his face would be the perfect mix of hurt and exhaustion. "She's been stalking me since we broke up," he'd explain, running his hands through his hair. "I hate that she's dragged you into this." He'd paint her as crazy, saying she'd scratched his car, shown up at his work, threatened to commit suicide if he didn't get back with her. Classic ex-girlfriend behavior, right? Marcus was incredible. He brought me coffee every morning, remembered every detail I told him, and never raised his voice. When I got food poisoning, he held my hair while I threw up and cleaned my bathroom without complaining. When my mom was hospitalized, he drove 4 hours with me and slept in the crappy chairs in the waiting room. Perfect boyfriend material. The way we met seemed like fate. I was having the worst day at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. 3 patients were in critical condition. 2 families were yelling at the staff, and I spilled coffee on my lab coat during my lunch break. I was crying in the parking lot when this cute stranger walked up to my car with a napkin and a worried smile. "Rough day?" Marcus asked softly. I felt awkward crying in public, but something in his warm brown eyes made me feel safe. He listened as I recounted my terrible shift, never checking his phone or seeming impatient. "You're incredible doing what you do," he said when I finished. "The world needs more people like you." He asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was perfect. A quiet restaurant where he asked thoughtful questions about my work, my dreams, my family. He seemed genuinely captivated by everything I said. "I've never met anyone as compassionate as you," he told me over dessert. "There's something light about you." By our third date, I was completely smitten. Marcus was attentive without being clingy, romantic without being corny, supportive without being patronizing. He remembered that I was lactose intolerant and always ordered dairy-free options. He knew I worked double shifts on Wednesdays and left encouraging messages to keep me going throughout the day. When he first mentioned his ex, it was in the context of an apology for being cautious in the relationship. "Jessica really wore me down," he said sadly during our 1-month dinner. "She made me feel like I couldn't trust my own judgment about people." He described a woman who had become increasingly possessive and paranoid over the course of their relationship. How she accused him of cheating on her without evidence. How she cluttered his phone and grilled him about his female coworkers. "I tried to be patient because I thought she just wanted reassurance," Marcus explained. "But it got scary. She showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m. demanding to know where I was. She threatened to hurt herself if I ever left her." When Jessica's first text arrived 2 months into our relationship, Marcus's reaction seemed entirely reasonable. "I'm so sorry you're having to deal with this," he said, genuinely concerned. I was hoping she'd moved on, but apparently she hasn't. The text was vague. Just, "Ask him about Seattle," with no context. Marcus explained that Jessica often made cryptic accusations that led nowhere. "The way she does this is to imply that I'm hiding something without actually saying what it is," he said with a tired sigh. "It's manipulative. She wants you to doubt me so that our relationship will fall apart." Over the next few months, Jessica's texts grew more frequent but remained painfully vague. Marcus always had a reasonable explanation. "Ask him about a second phone" came when Marcus had just gotten a work phone from his consulting company. "Ask him about credit cards" came right after Marcus mentioned having to clean up his credit report after an identity theft. Ironically, he claimed Jessica had stolen his information during their relationship. "Ask him about Portland" didn't make sense, because Marcus had never mentioned Portland. And when I asked, he seemed genuinely confused. "I've never even been to Portland," he said, frowning. Why would she say that? I began to feel sorry for Marcus. Jessica's stalking was clearly hurting him and affecting our relationship. Each message made me feel like I was being dragged into their toxic history. But Jessica's messages kept coming, becoming more specific. Ask him why he has 2 phones. Ask him about credit cards in his late father's name. Ask him about Rebecca in Portland. I mentioned Rebecca briefly one night while we were making dinner. Marcus was telling me about his day at work, laughing at a difficult client, when I said, Speaking of difficult people, Jessica mentioned someone named Rebecca today. Marcus froze, the wooden spoon he was stirring his pasta sauce with clattering onto the pot. How do you know that name? His voice had changed. Flat, cold, not at all like the warm tone I was used to. Just saying, I said carefully, suddenly aware of the change in the temperature in the room. He stared at me for a long minute, his jaw clenched, before cracking a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're probably thinking about someone else. But I wasn't thinking about someone else, and I began to listen. Marcus did indeed have 2 phones. He claimed to be alone for work, but he guarded it like classified information. He would receive calls at odd times and go outside to answer them, even in winter. When I joked about his secret agent behavior, he laughed it off but didn't change his habits. I also noticed how he positioned himself in our relationship. Gradually, imperceptibly, he became everything to me. My friends found him charming, but somehow I saw them less and less. Marcus always had well-thought-out reasons. Emma's been really negative lately, he'd say after I'd hung up with my best friend. I'm worried she's projecting her relationship problems onto you. Your mom seems tense when you visit, he'd remark after family dinners. Maybe giving her some space would be healthier for both of you. He never stopped me from seeing anyone. He was too smart for that. Instead, he'd plant seeds of doubt that would grow until I'd decide to isolate myself. One night, while he was in the shower, I checked his work phone. I told myself I was just being paranoid, influenced by Jessica's texts. I had to prove to myself that Marcus was innocent. Then maybe I could block Jessica and move on with our relationship. The list of contacts made my blood run cold. Rebecca, Portland, Ashley, Seattle, Nina, San Diego, Melissa, Phoenix, Emma, Denver, Katie, Austin, and at the bottom, Jessica, blocked. Each contact followed the same pattern. Dozens of deleted text threads, recent 2 a.m. calls, photos sent and received. My hands shook as I scrolled through Rebecca's messages. When are you coming back? You said 6 months. I saw your girlfriend on Instagram. Does she know about us? Marcus, I'm pregnant. Please answer my calls. I need to know what to tell the baby. The doctor says I have complications. I'm scared. The timestamps showed the messages were from last week. While Marcus was supposedly on a business trip to Milwaukee, I scrolled through other conversations. Ashley in Seattle was planning their anniversary for the following month. Nina in San Diego was wondering when he was permanently transferring to the California office. Emma in Denver was upset because he'd missed her birthday dinner. Each woman seemed to believe she was in a serious, exclusive relationship with Marcus. The shower was still running. I screenshotted everything I could before putting the phone back where I found it. When Marcus emerged, wrapped in a towel, water was still dripping from his hair. He looked perfectly normal. He kissed my forehead and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. You seem tense, he said, settling down next to me on the couch. Are you okay? I felt like I was living with a stranger. Just tired, I managed. He pulled me closer, stroking my hair with the same gentle caress I'd fallen in love with. You work too much, he murmured. Let me take care of you. The words that had once comforted me now made me shudder. How many other women had he said those same words to? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Marcus slept peacefully next to me. Every breath he took was ominous. Every movement made me tense. Who was this man lying next to me? The next morning, I called in sick and drove to Jessica's address. I found it in his contacts, under blocked, with the note, emergency only. Approach with caution. The apartment complex was nicer than I'd expected. Jessica answered the door, looking nothing like the crazy woman Marcus had described. Professional clothes, a tidy apartment, a wedding ring on her finger. You finally believe me, she said simply. She made coffee and spread a folder on the kitchen table. It was thick, organized with tabs and labels. This wasn't the obsessive ramblings of a crazy ex. It was documentation. Marcus works in cycles, she explained in a calm, business-like tone. He finds women in different cities, maintains relationships with 3 or 4 at a time. He tells each of us that the others are crazy exes or clingy friends. She showed me credit card statements and names I didn't recognize. Identity theft. He uses information from women he's dated to open accounts. My credit score dropped 200 points before I realized what was happening. My stomach dropped. "There's more," Jessica said softly. "And it's worse than financial fraud." She pulled out police reports, medical records, protective orders. The first police report was from Seattle. Ashley Martinez, 28, a practicing physician, was taken to the hospital with injuries consistent with domestic violence. The suspect fled before being arrested. The second was from San Diego. Nina Rodriguez, 26, an elementary school teacher. A protective order filed after threats and harassment escalated. The third was from Denver. Emma Thompson, 29, a social worker. Identity theft, stalking, violating a protective order. "There's a pattern with Marcus," Jessica said quietly. "He isolates women, makes them financially dependent. Then the abuse starts. First psychological, then physical." The paperwork painted a terrifying picture. 3 different women in 3 different cities, all with similar histories of manipulation, control, and abuse. "Rebecca's in the hospital right now," Jessica said quietly. "Broken ribs, cracked wrist, concussion. She finally filed a report, but he disappeared before she could be arrested. She showed me hospital photos that made me want to throw up. Rebecca looked just like me. Same hair color, same build, same age, same trusting smile in the before photos Jessica had printed off social media. He has a type," Jessica continued. "Mid-20s, works in healthcare or education, lives alone, family out of state. He does a lot of research before he hooks up with us." She showed me printouts from social media accounts. I'd forgotten I'd had dating profiles years ago. Public records. Even a college senior photo from a newspaper ad my mom had placed. "How long have you been together?" she asked. 6 months. She nodded grimly. "That's when things get intense. He's probably already isolated you from your friends and family." I thought about the last few months. How Marcus had subtly discouraged me from girls' nights out. How he'd found reasons why I shouldn't visit my parents. "They're too demanding. The commute is too long. You need to focus on your career." How he'd expressed concern about friends he said were toxic or taking advantage of me. Emma, my best friend since nursing school, had stopped calling after Marcus had mentioned that she seemed jealous of our relationship. My weekly calls with my mom had dwindled to monthly, then to every few months. Marcus was always supportive when I talked to them, but somehow I always felt drained afterward, like the conversations were more exhausting than they were worth. "Protective orders don't work because he moves around all the time," Jessica explained. "Uses different names, different cities. By the time law enforcement catches up with him, he's already moved on to the next victim." She handed me a thick folder labeled Sarah Chen, Chicago. "I've been documenting the entire case for 2 years. Rebecca isn't the first victim to end up in the hospital, and she won't be the last if we don't stop him." Inside were copies of medical records, police reports, and statements from 7 different women in 4 states. The pattern was identical every time. The love-bombing phase, excessive attention, gifts, and affection to make the victim feel special and chosen. The isolation phase, gradually cutting the victim off from their support systems through manipulation and subtle sabotage. The control phase, financial manipulation, monitoring of communications, restricting movement. The abuse phase, psychological torture escalating to physical abuse. The release phase, when the victim becomes too much of a problem or starts fighting back, he disappears and moves on to the next target. "Other women are willing to testify," Jessica said, "but we need current evidence. Something to prove he's still active, still targeting victims." She looked me straight in the eye. "We need your help to catch him." My hands shook as I processed it all. 2 years of warnings I'd ignored. 2 years of red flags I'd missed because Marcus was so charming, so perfect. "What do I need to do?" Jessica explained the plan. The FBI was building a case of interstate fraud and stalking, but they needed concrete evidence of ongoing crimes. "You're going to continue as normal, documenting everything, his activities, his phones, his finances, his communications with other victims." "Agent Rodriguez is the lead investigator," Jessica said, handing me a business card. "She's been tracking Marcus for 3 years. You can call her anytime, day or night. If you feel unsafe, leave," Jessica emphasized. "Promise me, it's not worth your life." I promised. But as I drove home, I wondered how I would know when it was no longer safe. Marcus had never physically hurt me. He'd never even raised his voice. Anything dangerous about him was hidden beneath layers of charm and manipulation. Marcus was cooking dinner when I walked in, humming jazz like he didn't have a care in the world. The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs. He'd opened a bottle of wine and lit some candles. "How was your day, honey?" he asked, kissing my cheek with the same tender affection he always did. I forced a smile. "Fine, just tired." "I made your favorite," he said, gesturing to the stir-fry. "I thought we could eat and watch that documentary you mentioned." He was so normal, so loving. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that Jessica was wrong. Maybe this had all been an elaborate misunderstanding. Maybe Marcus really was the victim of a vindictive ex. Then I noticed his phone buzzing on the counter. It was Rebecca. Marcus saw me looking and smoothly turned the phone face down. "Spam calls," he said casually. "They've been ringing all day, but I saw the name, and I knew Rebecca was in the hospital with broken ribs, wondering why the father of her unborn child had disappeared." That night, I lay awake, listening to him breathe next to me. This man who brought me flowers, who remembered my coffee order, who held me when I cried about difficult patients at work. This man who was apparently a predator. The next few weeks were torture. I documented everything, pretending nothing had changed. His second phone, his weird watch, his elaborate stories about work trips that I now knew were visits to other victims. I discovered that he was using my personal information too. My social security number to run a credit check, my mother's maiden name to create email addresses, my work address to receive packages I never saw. He had been systematically invading my privacy for months, and I never noticed because I trusted him completely. I installed a hidden camera app on my phone and began recording our conversations. The calm with which he lied was chilling. When I asked about his trip to Milwaukee, he described meetings and clients that I now knew were fictitious. In reality, he was in Portland with Rebecca. "How did the Johnson account go?" I asked over dinner. "Complicated," he said without blinking, "but I think we made good progress. The presentation went well." He was such a good liar that I almost believed him myself. I also began to pay attention to his stories about the past. Details that had once seemed insignificant now aroused suspicion. He claimed to be from Ohio, but his accent sometimes lapsed into something more like Texas. He said his father had been killed in a car accident, but I heard him refer to his father in the present tense on the phone. When I brought up these inconsistencies, he always had an explanation. The accent from childhood friends. He still spoke of his father in the present tense because he missed him so much. Plausible, sympathetic, completely convincing. I called Agent Rodriguez and set up a meeting. She was a businesswoman in her 40s who treated me with the kind of careful sympathy reserved for trauma victims. "You're very brave to come," she said in her FBI office. "Marcus Webb, that's his real name, by the way, is one of the most sophisticated predators we've ever encountered." She showed me his file. Real name Marcus Webb, born in Texas, age 34. History of fraud, identity theft, and domestic violence dating back to college. At least 12 known victims over 8 years. He's very smart and an excellent reader of people, Agent Rodriguez explained. He studies his targets for weeks before making contact. Everything about your relationship was calculated. She showed me surveillance photos of Marcus, watching me before our chance encounter in the parking lot. Photos of him at the coffee shop where I bought my morning latte, studying my routine. Photos of him talking to my coworkers, gathering information about my personal life. "How did he know I'd be in the parking lot that day?" I asked, feeling sick. "He didn't know. He'd been monitoring your schedule for 2 weeks. He'd been waiting for the right opportunity, the moment when you'd be vulnerable and receptive to a kind stranger. The parking lot was just one of many attempts. If that didn't work, he'd try something else. A flat tire he'd offer to fix. A spilled coffee he'd help clean up. A lost dog he'd ask you to help find." "Your profile says you're a nurse," Agent Rodriguez continued. "He specifically targets women in caring professions because you're predisposed to see the best in people and excuse anxious behavior. Everything I thought was special about our relationship, the way he understood me, the way he seemed to know what I needed, was just him playing on my psychology." "What do I need from you?" I asked. "Keep documenting everything. We're particularly interested in evidence of identity theft and interstate patterns. If we can prove he's conducting multiple relationships across state lines while committing fraud, we could get federal charges that will stick. She gave me recording equipment and detailed instructions on how to safely collect evidence. The most important thing is that you don't change your behavior in a way that would alert him, she emphasized. Marcus is very perceptive. If he suspects, he'll disappear and start over somewhere else. The weight of that responsibility was suffocating. Not just my safety, but the safety of Rebecca, Ashley, Na, and any future victims. Back home, I began my double life. A loving girlfriend by day, a secret FBI informant by night. Marcus suspected nothing. If anything, he seemed more attentive than usual. He brought me lunch to work, sent sweet texts throughout the day, planned romantic, unexpected dates. "You've been a little distant lately," he said one night while we watched Netflix. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired," I said, the lie coming easy now. "Work has been crazy. You work too much," he said, pulling me closer. "Maybe you should cut back on those extra shifts." He was increasingly suggesting it. Financial dependence was part of his control strategy. The more he could get me to rely on him, the harder it was to leave. "I like the extra money," I said carefully, "but I have enough for both of us," he replied. "I want to take care of you." I wrote everything down. 3 weeks into my investigation, Marcus announced another assignment. Denver this time, he said. 3 days. I would miss him. I knew he was really going to see Emma, who was leaving increasingly desperate messages about her relationship falling apart. As soon as he left, I called Agent Rodriguez. "We'll search the apartment," she said. "Do you know where he might be hiding things?" We found everything, hidden in the false bottom of his bedroom dresser. USB drives, prepaid phones, fake IDs, and damningly journals. Each diary was labeled with the woman's name and contained detailed plans for manipulation and control. Mine was labeled Sarah Chen, Chicago. Goal achieved, March 2023. Inside were pages of observations about my habits, my fears, my vulnerabilities, plans for manipulating me, notes about my financial situation and family relationships. Subject responds well to small attentions. Coffee preference, oat milk, latte, extra shot, no foam, use for daily reinforcement of mindfulness. Mention of absent father during childhood triggers emotional response. Use for bonding and trust-building opportunities. Works overtime at St. Mary's Hospital on weekends. Increasing fatigue makes her more receptive to suggestions and less willing to question inconsistencies. Best friend Emma shows signs of suspicion. Begin a gradual campaign of alienation. Suggest that Emma is jealous and unsupportive. Mother calls every Sunday at 2 p.m. Interfere with calls by planning events or creating emergencies to establish a pattern of unavailability. I read detailed notes on how to psychologically manipulate me. Marcus studied me like a lab rat from day one. Other diaries were worse. They detailed his escalation with previous victims, when to start tracking their phones, how to isolate them from their support systems, when financial coercion became necessary, when physical intimidation was required. Rebecca's journal contained pages marked "Implementing the Final Phase," plans to disappear when she became problematic and started asking too many questions about his other relationships. Ashley's journal contained detailed financial information, her social security number, bank account information, credit card numbers. He was systematically draining her of her savings while she thought they were building a life together. Na's journal contained photographs of her apartment, her work schedule, her family members. There were notes about her security system and which neighbors were home during the day. I photographed each page with shaking hands, barely able to cope with the level of calculation embedded in his predatory behavior. When Marcus returned from Denver, I waited in the living room with Jessica, Agent Rodriguez, and 2 other FBI agents. His face went through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion, recognition, fear, then that cold mask I'd glimpsed once when I'd mentioned Rebecca's name. "What's going on here?" he asked calmly, setting down his duffel bag as if this were a perfectly normal situation. Agent Rodriguez showed him the warrant. "Marcus Webb, you are under arrest for interstate stalking, identity theft, wire fraud, and violation of a federal restraining order." Marcus looked directly at me. His expression was almost disappointed, as if I had failed a test he expected me to pass. Sarah, whatever they told you, it's not true. You know me. But I didn't know him at all. I had fallen for a carefully constructed character designed to exploit my weaknesses. I found the journals, I said quietly. For the first time, his composure completely broke. The mask slipped, and I saw the real Marcus underneath, cold, calculating, furious at being caught. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly as they cuffed him. As they led him away, he turned around once more. You're going to regret this, he said. Not to the agents or Jessica. To me. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The trial took 8 months. 6 women testified about his pattern of violence. Rebecca spoke from a wheelchair. Her injuries were still healing. She had given birth to a daughter, Marcus's, 3 months earlier. He disappeared the day I told him I was pregnant, she said on the witness stand. I haven't heard from him since until the police called about his arrest. Ashley testified about financial fraud, how he stole over $40,000 from her accounts and opened credit cards in her name that she was still paying off. Nina described stalking and psychological torture, how he convinced her to move across the country for a non-existent job, how he isolated her from her family and friends until she was completely dependent on him. Emma told the court about physical abuse, how he started with playful pushes that gradually became violent, how he accused her of making him angry until she believed it was her fault. The evidence was overwhelming. Credit card fraud, identity theft, stalking, assault, violating restraining orders in several states. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for the first 8. At his sentencing, his lawyer tried to paint him as a man with abandonment issues who simply loved too much. Mr. Webb suffered from childhood trauma that led to unhealthy attachment patterns. The defense attorney argued that he never intended to cause harm. He was simply desperate for a connection. The judge wasn't buying it. Mr. Webb treated these women like targets on a hunt. She said it was calculated predatory behavior, not a lost romance. The level of planning and manipulation demonstrated in these crimes shows a complete lack of empathy and respect for the humanity of his victims. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. You studied these women like prey. You learned their weaknesses specifically so you could exploit them. You destroyed their finances, their relationships, their sense of security, and in some cases, their physical health. This court finds no evidence of redemption or potential for rehabilitation in your conduct. Marcus sat quietly throughout the sentencing, showing no emotion. But as he was led away, he glanced back at the gallery where all of his victims sat. He smiled. After the trial, Jessica and I kept in touch. She had remarried and was expecting her first child. Rebecca was in physical therapy, but making good progress, and her daughter was healthy and beautiful. How do you cope? Jessica asked during one of our coffee breaks 6 months after the sentencing. To be honest, I struggled. 2 years of my life were a lie. I loved a man who saw me as prey. Worse, I ignored clear warnings because I so desperately wanted to believe the fairy tale. I wonder if I'm stupid all the time, I admitted. How did I not see that? You're not stupid, Jessica said firmly. He's just so good at what he does. That's what's dangerous about him. She was right. Marcus had spent years perfecting his technique. He knew exactly how to mirror what we wanted, how to make us feel special and chosen. He studied psychology and human behavior the way other people study medicine or law. An FBI profiler said something that helped me, Jessica continued. She said that our ability to love and trust is not a weakness. It's what makes us human. The problem isn't that we trusted too easily. The problem is that there are people in the world who take advantage of that trust. The hardest part was trusting my judgment again. Every date felt like a potential threat. Every kind gesture from a man made me suspicious. Every compliment felt manipulative. I went to therapy twice a week and joined a support group for survivors of emotional abuse. Slowly, I began to understand that Marcus hadn't just stolen my money and time, he'd stolen my ability to trust my own senses. He made you doubt your reality, my therapist explained. That's why this type of abuse is so destructive. It doesn't just damage your body or your bank account. It damages your sense of self. Other victims in group therapy had similar stories, not necessarily of romantic partners, but of family members, friends, employers who used subtle manipulation to control and exploit them. The insidious part, said Maria, who was financially abused by her brother, is how they make you complicit in your own victimization. You start making excuses for them, covering for them, defending them to the people who are trying to help you. That's exactly what I did with Jessica's warnings. Marcus didn't have to shut her up. He taught me to do it myself. A year after Marcus's conviction, Agent Rodriguez called me. "He's running a dating scam from prison," she told me, "using contraband phones to target women on dating apps. We're building another case." Even behind bars, he couldn't stop. He convinced 3 different women to send him money for legal fees, claiming he'd been wrongfully convicted. One woman sent over $5,000 before her sister intervened. "How is that possible?" I asked. "He's incredibly persuasive," Agent Rodriguez said. "And there are always people willing to believe that everyone deserves a second chance." 2 months later, another woman contacted me through Jessica. She corresponded with Marcus for 6 months after meeting him through a prison chat site. He told her he had been wrongfully convicted, portraying himself as a victim of vengeful exes and a corrupt justice system. "He seemed so genuine," she wrote in her letter, "so remorseful and eager to right the wrongs. I was planning to visit him next month." She almost believed him until she found the court records online and read our statements. "Thank you for speaking out," she wrote. "Without your testimony, which is public record, I could have been victim number 8. That's when I realized something important. Marcus was trying to break me, to make me feel worthless, crazy, and small. Instead, he made me stronger and turned his victims into a network of women determined to protect each other. Jessica, the crazy ex he warned me about, saved my life. Rebecca, Ashley, Nina, Emma, and I saved each other by being brave enough to tell the truth. Now I'm the crazy ex warning his current targets, and I'll keep warning them until he can't hurt anyone else. I started a blog called The Crazy Ex Files, where victims of emotional abuse share their stories. It gets thousands of views every month from people trying to figure out if their own relationships are healthy. The most common comment: "I thought I was going crazy." That's how manipulation works. She makes you question your own perception of reality until you can't trust yourself anymore. But here's what I've learned. If multiple people are warning you about someone, listen. If your friends and family are expressing concerns about your relationship, listen. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, listen. Because sometimes the crazy ex is the only one brave enough to tell the truth. 3 years later, I'm in a healthy relationship with David, a pediatric surgeon I met at a medical conference. He's never asked me to keep a secret or question my friendships. He encourages me to trust my instincts, not undermine them. When I told him about Marcus, he didn't try to fix me or convince me to get over it. He simply listened and then said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. That must have been scary." David has gotten to know my friends and family. He encourages me to stay close to them. When Jessica comes to Chicago, he insists on making dinner for all of us. He treats the other victims like the heroes they are. "You saved each other," he says. That takes incredible courage. Marcus is still in prison. He will be up for parole in 12 years. Jessica and I are already planning to be there when that hearing comes. All of us will be there. Every woman he tried to destroy. We'll tell our stories again as many times as it takes. Some exes are crazy, but sometimes they're the heroes of the story. And sometimes the person everyone warns you about really is dangerous. Listen to the warnings. Listen to your gut. Listen to the women who came before you, because we're not crazy, we're survivors.